Long-haired weirdos, short-haired weirdos, vandals, hooligans.
The government, hug the government, love the government, hug the government, love.
Welcome to The Politics Guys. I'm Trey Orndorff, a political scientist at Oklahoma Christian University, and I'm joined by Justin Holmes, professor of political science at the University of Northern Iowa. Justin, welcome to the midweek Ideology show.
Yeah, it's good to be here.
As always, for listeners, remember, each of us have been going through different kinds of topics, and Justin and I have been going through political ideologies. And we've made it through what you might think of as being the kind of classic ideologies. And that means that we have taken a look at liberalism, we've taken a look at conservatism. And last time we were together, we finished that out with fascism. As a matter of fact, we talked about that on the weekend show as well. And what makes classical ideologies classical isn't necessarily their time. It's also what they're responding to. So classical ideologies are oftentimes tied up in the relationship for or against the Enlightenment. But as we get to new ideologies, that's not really the question anymore. It's not the real big dividing line. And today we're going to start off with feminism, and we're going to see that feminism, it's not particularly tied to the Enlightenment per se. I mean, it's going to be there, but it's not the big go. And we're going to be taking on feminism first. We're going to move into multiculturalism later on, environmentalism, and eventually we'll take a look at religion as a political ideology, which I think is an understudied area of political science. But today, feminism, Justin, and I think it'd be helpful. I'm just going to kind of set us up to start with. Feminism is a little bit unique in that there are what scholars are going to call waves to it. So you got first wave feminism and second wave feminism and third wave feminism. And they're going to be a little bit different, and they're going to have some deep differences from one another. So first wave feminism is really going to be defined as an extension of liberalism. It's going to say, look, liberalism's got a lot of the stuff right. You just left out women, and we need to include them in that conception. And we often mark Mary Wollstonecraft as the beginning of that era of, hey, we need to think about it. She writes this really important work on the vindication of the rights of women. And then again, we're going to talk more about each of these, but just kind of an overview. And then we move to what's sometimes called the second wave of feminism. And here, it's moving away from formal political rights, and it's beginning to highlight the construction of social forces that have subordinated women. It's the beginning of thinking about things like gender roles and what that means in society. And we'll talk more about that. And then more recently, we've had third wave feminism, which really draws on Black, queer, transgender, and lesbian, anti-imperialist, anti-capitalist positions, focused on sex work a little bit. And then sometimes there's even conversations, this is an ongoing conversation in political theory, that there might be a fourth wave where women from not what we think of as being the West kind of try to recapture feminism in a way. And again, that one, I'm going to put a question mark on that one for listeners because it's kind of out there. Maybe it exists, but there is definitively kind of among scholars, the three waves of feminism. And so Justin, I thought we would start by talking about, that the origins of feminism and, how it kind of gives its birth here in the wake of liberalism.
I think a couple of sort of, liberalism and Enlightenment principles that are kind of at stake here. One being that rationality thing that we keep coming back to, but the other being, there is this equality notion sort of shot through kind of so much of the Enlightenment stuff, although it is a very, very constrained version of equality. So we've got this conception, if we're looking at somebody like Locke or what have you, where there is this conception of equality, but it leaves an awful lot of people, including women, out. I think that it potentially opens the door, but I feel like a lot of this, is sort of a it's an ideology sort of born of conditions and contradictions in many ways, especially maybe this first wave where, you have this very clear, kind of rational and equality notion. But then this very obvious group of, I don't know, half the population, just being shut out.
Yeah, I think it's hard sometimes for today. I mean, most people listening are going to be influenced by feminism. And so when you look at first wave feminists, they almost feel like sellouts, I think, to the modern reader. Because they're like, that's what you're talking about?
And gosh, I mean, they're not asking for a whole lot. I mean, it's maybe not even like equality is maybe not even the way to put, it's
well,
just to be a better companion, on some level, educate me so that I'm a better conversation,
Yeah, like I can be a better wife, right?
Like I'm not looking for a job necessarily, in these early.
I think part of that is you have to recognize the milieu into which it exists.
Right.
And that is in this era, women were considered to not be able to have reason. What made a woman was a lack of reasoning capabilities. All they could do was emote. Now, you might still think of that as being a little bit of a gender stereotype that exists, but I mean this in a very explicit, right? Scientific way even, right? Women are going to be emoters. Men needed to subordinate women because they couldn't be rational. And you might recall, liberalism requires each of the actors to be rational. So liberalism, for the most part, leaves women out because ipso facto, they can't be a part of this because they're, they don't have rationality. As a matter of fact, the only person at that time who's a liberal who's really going to take women's rights seriously is going to be John Stuart Mill.
Right. And that's well after this, I mean, that's 100 years into the project of liberalism or more, at that point.
Yeah. So. I mean, because he's going to be writing with and to Mary Wollstonecraft. And Mary Wollstonecraft, she makes this really phenomenal argument given the era that she's in. And she basically says, well, look, who's in charge of children? Women. And so if you think women are rational enough to be educators to children, then include boys, then we've got to, then you're already consenting to the fact that we have enough potentiality to be reasonable enough to be some kind of participant in the political process. It's a really cool little argument.
Yeah. And kind of dangerous in some ways. I mean, it has the feeling it could backfire, a little, oh gosh, we don't want you raising our boys then, might be the...
That's true. Well, I don't think that was too much of a danger. I'm not sure there were a lot of men during that period going, what we're going to do is we're going to start taking care of all the babies.
Boarding school.
Well, I mean, that's...
But actually, and speaking to that, I mean, this is, I think this early wave too, I mean, it is a very kind of upper middle class elite, kind of space. I mean, I think the concerns here that are addressed, are largely not the concerns of probably a majority of women, which I think is a theme that we'll keep coming back to, about, who is included and who is not, in that. But, the way, as I look at Wollstonecraft, I mean, it's very much about an education that, just a lot of people don't have access to, period.
Unfortunately, I have to end our and support and preview right there. If you'd like to get all of this episode with myself and with Justin, or so many other of our midweek supporter exclusive shows, you're going to have to become a supporter of the Politics Guys. How do you do that? Well, it's easy. Head down to the show notes and click on support. There's so much to be done right there. It just takes a couple of minutes and you're going to get so much. And as a matter of fact, if you do it on a yearly basis, you're going to get a discount. You're going to get this show. You're going to get all of the shows ad free. You're going to get access to our Discord group. I could go on. So head down to the show notes now, or if you're old school, head to politicsguys.com/support or head to patreon.com/politicsguys. If you're not in a financial place to do that right now, you can always email us at mail@politicsguys.com. You can also reach us there for any other questions you have on feminism or anything else. I always appreciate if you would subscribe, rate, and review the Politics Guys. That's really important. We finish, as always, by giving a great big shout out to our executive producers. And they are Wilmer Moreno, Daniel Toe, Ryan Beasley, Don Oglesby, Derek Schmidt, Dakota Heath, Jason Chrysler, Dave Dean, Jeremy Larson, Brian Matza, Jody Marie Miller, and Sean Fugit. We'll be back with a full weekend episode as we always are. I hope to see you then.
This podcast is part of the Democracy Group,